Bobbi Gibb, born 1942. The marathon mogul and women's rights hero. Suburban Boston in the 1950s was a sexist shambles. Not that any of the other eras or places covered in this book haven't been. Women were expected to be passive, run around after their husbands, fix the martinis and attend to their male egos. Anyone burdened with this task should know they need to be handled with care, require constant stroking, feeding on the hour every hour, and kept out of direct sunlight. Bobbi was born to run, but she didn't want to run after or for a man. For Bobbi, running wasn't only instinctive, it was her salvation. Bobbi, Roberta, was the elder of two sisters. Her dad was a chemistry professor, and her mum a frustrated housewife. Homemaking sat about as comfortably as the only token female on a comedy panel show might with her ma, but still she tried to force Bobbi to conform to the expected femininity of the time, more concerned for the feelings of the apple cart than her daughters. During her years at high school in Winchester, Bobbi was the only one of her girlfriends not interested in prom gossip or the latest fashion, and the only one still interested in sports post-puberty. Bobbi's hobbies, TM, were not seen as pastimes for girls. The thought of girls running through the woods with dogs or sleeping outside under the stars would have produced a collective sick in mouth from society. Her chosen subjects might have raised similar scrutiny because Bobbi loved maths and science, which she studied at Tufts University. She'd hoped to go to medical school, but she was told during the interview process that she was too pretty, which would upset her male classmates, so instead she had to take night classes. They reckoned she'd leave early to get married and have babies, and refused her application. I'm going to need a moment for this one. Please respect my privacy at this difficult time. In the mid-1960s, she gained a place at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, an 8-mile commute from Winchester, and one she ran there and back in her Red Cross nurse's shoes. So out there were her actions, running shoes for women weren't even being manufactured at that time. In 1964, Bobbi's dad took her to watch the Boston Marathon, and it was the first time she'd seen other people running. She knew no other runners, she'd never even heard of the marathon, but she instantly felt at home. Bobbi had found her destiny. She describes it as, "I ran as a way of reaffirming some semi-conscious ancient bond between the earth and myself as a human animal." That summer, she travelled to California and back with her Malamute pup, Moot, in her VW bus. Her only plan was to run and keep running, pushing herself to go further each time. Unfortunately, she sustained an injury and had to miss the 1965 marathon. But it wasn't the end for Bobbi. How many men have you heard say they could have been a pro footballer if it wasn't for that injury? Instead, Bobbi simply trained harder and ran further. She once ran so far along the beach she got detained by the Border Control Police for accidentally crossing into Mexico. Bobbi knew she could run the 26-mile marathon because she was already stomping 40-mile runs. 2 months before the 1966 race, Bobbi was 23 years old and she wrote to the Boston Athletic Association for an official marathon number. The race director replied to say that their regulations forbade women to compete in any race longer than 1.5 miles. Furthermore, women are physiologically incapable of running 26.2 miles. Because she was a woman, Bobbi was seen as a medical liability. Squint. Women competing in sports made no sense to them. Some people genuinely worried that if women exercised, they might die, become men, or worse, gay. Bobbi knew she needed to show the world that these sorts of beliefs about females, athletes or otherwise, were tosh. It had become a feminist statement. She had to be the first woman to run the marathon. If she wasn't invited to the party, she was going to be forced to crash it. And so, in a 3.5-day journey, Bobbi took a Greyhound bus across the country to Hopkinton, where the race began. When her parents found out, they were petrified. Bobby's dad thought she was mentally ill, but her mum came around to the idea. A chord was struck when she recognised how empowering her actions were about to be, and they didn't only hug for the first time in years, but her mum drove her to the starting line. Hiding in the forsythia bushes by the starter pen on the corner of Hayden Row Street, Bobby, wearing her brother's Bermuda shorts, black bathing suit, oversized blue hoodie, and a pair of men's size 6 Adidas sneakers, awaited the starting pistol. When it fired, she stumbled from the bushes into the midst of the runners, wondering how many other women writers, artists, scientists, and soldiers had to disguise their femininity so well that history has still not discovered. I'll send her a copy of the book. Bobby herself was about to run into history. Afraid she was going to get arrested, Bobby kept her head down and her hood up, but it was Scorchio and there was no way she could go the distance in disguise. Before long, her fellow runners started to notice she was a woman, but rather than rugby tackle her off the course, they encouraged her. It gave her the guts to strip a layer, and when the crowds realised too, it caused a great commotion. Men and women delighted in her involvement, and their screams of enthusiasm propelled her every step. Bobby was slinging less than 7-minute miles. She'd found her happy pace, and it was Speedy Gonzales. Just before the 12-mile mark, she overtook Navy Commander Charles Stolzer, who blinked hard when a woman passed him. He couldn't catch up, but that male ego kicked in and he said, "No way is a girl gonna beat me." So I stayed as close as I could. Cool story, bro. By 20 miles, Bobby was in searing pain. She wasn't used to running in sports shoes or on pavement, but she didn't want to set women's rights back any further. She could tell from the women's eyes in the crowd that things were never going to be the same again, and they helped her to fly over the finishing line. Bobby's time was 3 hours, 21 minutes and 40 seconds. She finished ahead of 2/3 of her male competitors, and the crowds and press went wild. Some tabloid twerps tried to get her to say she was a man-hater, but rather than sit and swig on male tears, she simply said that she loved men and women. She was running for equality, and I hope she considers running for president. After all that running, all she'd achieved and all the support she experienced, Bobby still wasn't allowed to join the male runners in the post-marathon meal. The papers the next day were farcical. Reporters, fluent in nincompoop, wrote articles such as, "A game girl in a man's game. Boston was unprepared for the shapely blonde housewife who came out of the bushes to crush male egos," and "A girl in the marathon? Egad, is nothing sacred." Even the official who'd rejected her initial application crawled out of his pit to state that Bobby didn't run the race. She merely covered the same route as the official race while it was in progress. No girl has ever run in the Boston Marathon. And then we woke up and it was all a dream. I wish. But Bobby's dream was realised. She inspired more women than we'll ever know. The year after Bobby, Catherine Switzer became the first numbered entry to run after she applied as K.V. Switzer. Mid-race, she was physically attacked for doing so by the director. Boston didn't allow women to run officially until 1972, by which point Bobby had already joined the race successfully twice more. These days, tens of thousands of women run it every year. On the 50th anniversary race in 2016, Bobby was too unwell to run, but instead was made a Grand Marshal by the Boston Athletic Association. That year's winner, Ethiopia's Atsedi Baisa, gave her trophy to Bobby. Without her, Atsedi would never have been allowed to prove her running genius. After 2 decades of being a lawyer, Bobby became an artist, motor neuron disease researcher, and advocate for social change. The Bobbi Gibb Marathon Sculpture Project is her campaign to get a statue of a female runner in among all the male runner statues in Boston. You've allowed me to donate to charities and causes mentioned in this book by buying it and supporting women. If Bobby has taught us anything, it's that change can happen within our lifetime, and we can make that happen. I hope her statue beats this book out into the world.